let's have a conversation on agribusiness, agri-talk. And this morning we are joined once again by Dr. Bimal Kantaria, who's the chairman of the Agriculture Sector Network at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance and the principal secretary for the State Department of East African Community in the Ministry of East African Community and Regional Development, Dr. Kevit Desai. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and we are glad to have you. Welcome to the Situation Room. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Kevit Desai, Principal Secretary. You're not able to join us on video. You are on the road. Where are you this morning?
I'm actually waiting to enter a meeting with the Committee on Finance after this call.
Okay. At Parliament.
So I'm in the parking lot, yes. That's correct, yes.
All right. All the best as you speak to our representatives. Promise to answer all questions truthfully. Dr. Kantaria, good to see you again. This is another time that we're having you on the show. Always interesting to have you. Asante sana for joining us.
No, thank you very much indeed, and I'm really happy to be back. Thank you.
Now, we want to have a conversation on the Agribusiness Buyer-Seller Platform, the East African Agribusiness Buyer-Seller Platform. Right off the bat, what is this, Dr. Kantaria?
So, this is an interesting way of using technology. The Agribusiness Confederation of East Africa was formed about a year ago, and it's the umbrella body of all private sector organizations in agriculture across East Africa. Again, a very new thing for us. But it can only be done with technology. So we're using it with Zoom, and we connected Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi onto one platform. And the idea is to connect farmers with end users in Kenya. So we're using Facebook as a technology medium, but it's something completely new. It's quite exciting how we're using all this new stuff to bring farmers and customers together.
So what do? They farmers and all, they get on board onto one platform, let's say Facebook, and then?
Yeah, so this is actually, it's quite popular in Kenya. There's lots of Facebook pages for farmers in Kenya. It's really big. Some of them have got a couple of million farmers on it. So we thought, why don't we extend it throughout the region? So if you're a farmer in, let's say, Uganda, and you want to sell your produce to Kenya, so we've got the Kenya Association of Manufacturers involved. They will post, let's say, we want maize or we want tomatoes. And in return, the farmer in Uganda will say, I have got tomatoes, whatever. And we try to link buyer-seller. It's already happening, but it's happening through brokers. So we're trying to cut out the middleman and say, can the farmer deal directly with the end user? Is it the supermarket or is it the manufacturer who knows the source of his produce? And the farmer gets a better price because he's dealing directly with his end user.
Are you suggesting that the existence of the broker has a negative effect in this particular sector?
Yeah, to an extent. Although, of course, businessmen are businessmen, and we in this country we encourage that because it's linking, or else they help with logistics and all that. So I think we have a very good business community in this country. Brokers again, it has negative connotations, but these guys link obviously farmers with and they bring it across the borders and stuff. But what we've realized is that maybe some of these businessmen may not be paying fair prices to farmers, and in return maybe overcharging the end users. So if we can find a way of bridging that gap, so there's more transparency in the system, then the businessman can perhaps transport the goods through the borders and all that. But I think there's a role for everybody to play. There's a win-win for everybody in this, and everybody will benefit by, and of course the key in all this is everybody makes profit, and that's what we are trying to encourage.
Are we saying that currently there's no flow then in terms of information and communication between sellers, growers, and buyers right now? Or that it needs to be ramped up a lot more in the way in which it is happening at the moment?
So when we started ASEA, where I'm the current chairman, one of the things we quickly realized when we talked to the leaders in Tanzania and Uganda is they know that all their produce is being consumed in Kenya. Kenya is the biggest consumer of fresh produce in the region, but they just didn't know who is consuming it, which manufacturer is using it for tomato paste or which farmer is using it for their potato crisps and things like that. They know it's ending up in Kenya. They just know where it was. So by us using using technology, and you won't believe how clever farmers are these days. They're all high tech. The farmers groups on Facebook are huge. So I think just bridging the information gap will help everybody. It's something new. I'm not saying it'll be 100%, but it's going to be quite interesting to see how effective this thing is. And we're launching it this afternoon.
What appears, if we talk about agriculture and the trade between the East African countries, how would we rate in terms of how much are we selling, how much we are bringing in, and in terms of communication, then flow of communication between the traders in the East African community countries? What appears?
This is a very important industry indeed. It's within the East African community, it contributes almost up to 48% of GDP with respect to member countries. If we're looking at Kenya, for example, our ability to not only grow but also produce and process fruits and juices for export. I mean, if we look at countries like Netherlands and so on, they utilize 28.1% of our exports. If we look towards Uganda, Uganda is the largest producer of fresh fruits and vegetables within EAC, and with it, the production in Uganda is in the hands of smallholder farmers. Even with respect to Burundi, which are the three partner states which are within this platform, we see that the overall growth has grown by 94.4% between 2016 and 2018, and with a total, worth of $313,000 worth of fruit juice development, which signifies that, that increasingly, on one hand, this is a key sector, but its potential for growth is there and can be further accelerated through such platforms and a systematic approach towards addressing an interactive intercommunication system.
Would we say then that lack of seamless communication between the various actors in the value chain is coming up as a concern, even is something that you've noticed at government level?
Yes, indeed. I think that this is where the crux is. Indeed, that thought is something that, we need to dive much deeper into. What we appreciate from our existing position is that we barely trade with respect to intra-trade up to some 15% between East African partner states. Now, this is a huge lost opportunity because of the overall potential for increasing markets between partner states. If we look at agriculture specifically, the existing trade by MSMEs is 20%. The trade in manufactured exports of fruits and vegetables is at 5%. So this just indicates that there's a challenge with respect to value chains. And if we look at value chains from a systematic perspective, then communications is an important element. Coordination is an important element. The infrastructure we have not done too badly on because each of the partner states have invested heavily on roads, ports, and air systems, etc., and so on, although the cost and time taken for transport is still very high in comparison to international standards. But if we look at the policy environment, the market systems, the regulations, these are also being developed together with the standards, issues with respect to phytosanitary standards and other key capacities. But the key hinge is actually communications and our ability to be more interactive so as to promote a nexus between the farmer, the productive sector, and the public sector by way of ensuring that we create that ecosystem that promotes transformation. So while this promotes a link between farmers, buyers and sellers, it has major implications on how it actually informs regional systems which are striving to see how we're able to leverage from the fact that we are an economic bloc and we have 150 million people and we're growing into several other countries. And what are we doing about markets collectively as all stakeholders?
So this is being considered when you talk about communication and technology. So this platform, with what we see, it goes beyond just sellers and farmers and the availability of product and then the market that's available, buyers. It goes beyond that. There's so much more then that needs to be done to make sure that my product is reaching a buyer, and that I, as a buyer, then can actually make a purchase. So would you say that the details around this is what needs to be worked on much more than the availability of buyers and sellers currently? And I think that's for both of you.
Yes, well, that is also absolutely true, and we need to recognize that we need to build this ecosystem. It cannot just be done and be expected to be there. And, the starting point is to look at the demand and work backwards so that not only the supply is to standards. Like, for example, to illustrate this further, if you're importing maize into Kenya with respect to further production and export capabilities, it has to meet certain phytosanitary standards, and those standards need to be consistently designed, developed, and implemented, and therefore such platforms are the beginning of how we actually even look into further development of how the cooperation between public sector implementation of policy and standards and the private sector development and aggregation takes place. And we are therefore able to then, influence all the way from farm gate to factory certain processes. So we as government see this as a much bigger opportunity, and especially when the private sector starts working in close collaboration with the public sector so that we're able to promote the necessary alignment and relevance, but at the same time promote an enabling environment for the productive sector and the farmers and so on to play a role of self-regulation and capacity development towards that common end. EAC's vision is clearly that, that we are working as a bloc. It's there to further aggregate and further promote the development of agriculture for export purposes, as well as our own food security requirements. But within the context of exports, we need to meet huge steps as far as standards and capacity and capability is concerned. And this can only be done on a volume basis, which enables a value proposition for both the private sector and the public sector to invest in. And so this ecosystem that we're talking about is critical. And, the first step, of course, is to imagine how a farmer in Tanzania is growing maize, or in Burundi, for example, growing coffee, is able to communicate to the market efficiently. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in Burundi, but it can be in Kenya through this platform.
Dr. Desai, you've put it really well. I like the manner in which you've laid out your facts step by step. But even as we speak, we do have a sector that has actually achieved this very thing that you're saying, the tea sector. They, for the longest time, have been self-regulating. And all the countries around East and Central Africa who actually are involved in the production of tea get together and they conduct their business in an extremely profitable manner for themselves as well as for the government. Now, are we saying that with this platform that you're creating, that you envision creating something similar so that our agricultural produce can enjoy the economies of scale that come and the profitability that also comes with that unity in strength and numbers?
Yes, indeed. I think that you've touched on the example that we're looking at. The tea sector indeed is one of the most important examples that one can cite, one of the most successful. But then again, if we look at it, it's been constructed over 100 years ago, from the involvement of different countries to the export processing capacities in Mombasa and all the way into international markets. But if we even look at coffee, for example, the potential that it has as far as exporting to by almost 34% to African countries and around 3 to 4% abroad, is an example of such value chains that are interdependent, that promote standards, and as commodities, they're able to move extensively. And within that context, the government of Kenya has played significant roles in improving port facilitation and attestation fees and verification systems in order to keep ensuring that commodities like this keep being exported efficiently with great productivity. But what you touch on is essentially what we need to amplify manyfold into different sectors like livestock, food crops, cash crops, fishing, aquaculture, cassava, beans, bananas, potatoes, rice, maize, and all of these sectors which have similar potential, dairy production, fisheries, poultry, that need to essentially create those links and create those systems similar to that tea sector that you gave an example of. And I think that what we're seeing in the tea sector is an example of what could be achieved in other sectors by value promotion and alternative market opportunities for farmers. But it'll also consolidate the small-scale farmers. And what is absolutely important for the East African community is the backward and forward linkages. Agriculture promotes this at the highest level like no other sector. And therefore, the emphasis here, in trying to see how we design the systems around our unique situations of small-scale farmers. Like if you look at the maize value chain, it's small farmers who put everything together and put it onto a truck and then turn up to Namanga and subsequently into a factory in Nairobi. But how do we create this, not look at it as fragmented, but integrate it through communication systems? Because we're not likely to integrate so many farm systems at one go, but the possibility of communications and technology being a driver of being interactive, open, and transparent can, in a certain way, promote that linkage. And especially when it comes from the private sector itself, it's even more able to demonstrate reform and development.
Indeed. Dr. Kevit Desai, Principal Secretary, State Department for East African Community. We thank you very much for joining us this morning. Yes, you are just waiting to get into a meeting with the Committee of the National Assembly. All the best with that, and thank you for the contributions that you've made with us today.
Thank you.
We're having a conversation about the East African community, about taking advantage of the fact that Kenya is the biggest consumer of agriculture goods from the region. And we trade very well because we bring them in, we process, we send them out again as our exports to the same region. And the East African Agribusiness Confederation, the Agribusiness Confederation of East Africa, where it's the chair is Dr. Bimal Kantaria, who is with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance as well. They'll be doing a launch this afternoon of the Agribusiness Buyer-Seller platform. Just before we went to the break, we were having a conversation with him and Dr. Kevit Desai, who is the Principal Secretary for East African Community. And Dr. Desai has just decided, let him just stay a bit longer on the line so that you can continue this conversation before he steps into the meeting with the members of Parliament. So, Dr. Desai, because you're still on the line, then let us ask you this question. Now, Kenya is currently, the president is chairing the East African community. And we also have a Kenyan who is now heading the secretariat of the East African community. What do we stand to gain from this chairmanship round in terms of our leadership role in the East African community?
The EAC is a very broad-based institution, and one of its magnificence is the fact that, it covers all aspects, whether it's social, economic, or environment, everything from healthcare to trade issues, etc., and so on, and education issues, and so on, all with the hope of promoting integration. Now, specifically in this sector that you're talking about today, the aspiration and what His Excellency President Kenyatta espouses with respect to greater intra-trade is absolutely critical, because, why have a bloc and not have as many people, as many East African community citizens have access to opportunity? So the sectors that we're looking at are indeed, value chains around agriculture and similar sectors that have end opportunity. And within this context, our hope is that, we increase intra-trade, we find unique ways of inventing and creating trade hubs at border points. It's just startling to see. If I take you to Namanga or Busia or Malabar, you see thousands of traders, on a day-to-day basis carving out a livelihood, or MSMEs, performing a trade. And this needs to be organized, scaled and amplified, and also reachable through every artery possible within the context of the country. And it's for that reason, we have spent so much as a government with respect to an intermodal transport system. But what needs to happen quite clearly is that it's not just about importing and exporting commodities. It's all about value addition and how we're able to create that value and transition it into different processes of manufacturing all the way up to science, and in order to gain value for those that produce. And so the objective would be to work on standards. It would be to work on the entire ecosystem for markets, to reduce inefficiencies like NTBs and other challenges that we face, and create a very secure environment through the common external tariffs in order to ensure that we promote regional manufacturing in view of emerging markets, both in the UK, for example. Most of the produce that they consume is imported from abroad, and as far as fruit and vegetables are concerned. And similarly, if we look at the African Free Trade Area, that indeed is a further extension of our market for processed food. So the objective would be to see to it that we look into intra-trade opportunities to grow the agricultural basin, to promote maximum innovation supported by technology, which is absolutely critical. And so we look forward to the trade hubs, these platforms, these confederations. This is really enlightening. This is a new thing, that we're creating confederations in agriculture that will then work in close cooperation with the EAC and government in order to address the systemic issues of policy, legislation, regulation. And so there's great hope now within the context of this leadership.
Okay, so then, Bimal, for you now, looking at how this is all going to play out currently, and taking into consideration that, the market itself, there have been a few dents here and there previously when it comes to things like farmers complaining about input prices and things like that. Can you ensure with this platform now, already people are going to get really excited about buying and selling, trading on the platform. Are there concerns about a dent in the supply then when it comes to what we've seen in terms of shortages where farmers have complained about costs of input? Is that something that has been taken into consideration, and how will it play out?
So yeah, it's a very good question, to be honest. But it's what we've done now. We've got just a trading platform right now, and then the second phase of this initiative is put a fintech model on top of it. So already we're talking to one or two financial technology companies that really, how do you do the actual trade online with money flowing? So that's the next stage. And like PS Desai has mentioned, there's so many multiple sort of layers you can put onto this thing. So financial technology is important. Then we're using fintech. The PS has mentioned about the Namangan border one-stop shop. Our dream in KEPSA is to have zero border control, zero stop, so that movement of trade between the countries is seamless, and you just use technology to track the goods. Mm-hmm. Already the technology exists with blockchain or RFID. So the idea is to have as much seamless movement across the borders, which will reduce the cost of business, reduce these interruptions you just mentioned and these bumps on the road. Again, let business do what business is good at. Let us function. Let us, let market forces dictate. And really, what the president has done, His Excellency, last week when the Tanzanian president was here, he just said, let these guys just get on with it. Stop putting all these roadblocks in the middle. Let maize flow. Let Tanzanians work in Kenya if they want to work in Kenya. I think our president is excellent. I mean, he really is. A proper businessman. He understands how business flows. So I'm hoping that under his leadership, under the leadership of course CS and our PS as well, that some of these roadblocks are removed over the next we've got 10 months left as president. Yeah.
I'm liking this conversation more and more. But let me ask this question: as even as we think of this platform and as we look at, say, I'm specifically talking now about KEPSA. We have the Africa Free Trade Area coming into being and into operation. Do you have plans to take advantage of this particular union?
Yeah, so for us, it's the most exciting thing possible is this Africa Free Trade Organization. As you know, I wouldn't want to use the word dominant in East Africa, but we're a big player in East Africa. And for us as manufacturers, us as businessmen, we just want the market to grow. We want to be less reliant on the Western countries. We want to be more reliant in Africa. We can manage Africa. We understand the culture. We understand the language. We know how business flows. For us, it's probably the most important, as KEPSA, new development that's going to happen in our business sector. I'll give you an example. How important, if you look at the future, why can't we have, for instance, an electric car being made in Tanzania, the seats or the engines made in Kenya, the batteries made in Uganda, the leather components coming from Ethiopia, and we put it all together in one of the locations. That's what Europe is all about. When they make Airbus, they take parts from all over the European Union and they put it together. And
so
that's
why
our
can't
vision.
I have to stop you there and say, because I think oftentimes we can be inspirational in the way in which we speak, and we say that we can do this and we can be on the same level as other countries in the world. But then if you look at the thing that's missing, it's actually something quite simple. I know where I see it from somebody who's in business and is operating in this manner. What is the problem and why can't we actually operate like that? Because we have the resource in terms of human resource, in terms of material, we have vast land and resources. What is the kink, or rather the link that is missing? Why can't we do it? Because we can, but we don't.
So you'll be surprised how dominant we are in Tanzania and Uganda, or how much investment we have in Uganda. I think businessmen generally are quite shy of exposing themselves too much, considering the overall political climate in some of these other countries. But we are the largest single investors in Uganda. We're the single largest investors in Tanzania. We are massive in Zambia. We are also big investors. A lot of trading going on in Ethiopia. We're already in all these countries, and we're playing a significant role in these countries. It's just we are a little bit careful on how much we talk about these things. But the business is going on, and we are really, if you look at what's happening in Kenyan manufacturing, I think about 40% of our total output is being exported to these regions. It's already happening, although you may not know about it. But I think we're doing an excellent job. We've been in these markets for decades. I think there is really good stuff happening. I'm just happy that the road networks are opened up. All these things that the government is doing right now are exactly what we want them to do. Recently, we as Desai and our group, we went to Namanga border post. We went to Busia. We visited them. We went with Honorable Dr. Maduki, who is obviously now the most important person in ES in terms of the bureaucracy. I think that now the areas that we are a little bit frustrated with, I think now we'll sort them out. But we're there already. We're doing a good job.
I think you are, but there's a balance that I want to discuss with you. Now, this is the balance of the people who make all these things possible, the so-called small-scale farmer. Now, I know a lot of what goes into how they benefit from this whole situation is dependent on the government. But again, since they end up with the manufacturer, they end up working at some level with those who actually use their produce. Is there a plan? Is there a way in which KEPSA and the association that deals with all these things can actually play a part in ensuring that the farmer doesn't get the short end of the stick? Let me explain why I'm asking this question. The tea sector for the longest time, again, is my example. It still is a profitable sector, but the majority, the bulk of the trade that we see in the tea sector comes from the small-scale farmer. It's the truth. Now, for the longest time, Kenya, KTDA did a job that, it still does a job that is considered excellent. However, in recent times, there have been developments which for KTDA have been excellent, but they are not mirrored in the benefit that the small-scale farmer has. So now, if I mirror small-scale farmer, okay, in tea, small-scale farmer in maize, in sugar, and in everything else that we cover, should you not then also play a role in ensuring that this small-scale farmer actually fully benefits from his produce?
Yeah, so it's exactly what we've done with this Facebook page, and we're just targeting the small farmer. I'll give you the concerns we have in Kenya.
Yes.
We are the largest consumers of maize in the region. We know that the small-scale farmer in Tanzania and Uganda are the growers. The problem is the guys in the middle are taking the profit. So what we said is, manufacturers, can you now deal directly with the farmer in Uganda and Tanzania or Kenya in that instance? No problem. Can you sign contracts with these growers, the small-scale growers, and buy from them directly so that the farmer gets the highest price possible the manufacturer can afford? The farmer knows directly who the manufacturer is, and exactly what you just said is what our platform is there for, is to connect the small farmer with the big manufacturer. What is not happening at the moment, there is an information disconnect between the two, and it's our sincere hope that this is where the connection will happen. Again, I mentioned to you, you won't believe some of these farmers groups in Kenya on Facebook have got 3 to 4 million small-scale farmers on it. And if anybody can join in, and you can see the guy saying, I've got 10 tons of onions. This is my price. And at the bottom, you'll see in the comments, all right, send them to this company. This is my M-Pesa number. Already that connection is happening through technology. And I'm hoping this will now open up the region for us throughout using, helping small farmers.
Indeed, as you say this, Dr. Kantaria, the issue of marketing is a big one, especially for the smallholder farmers. So you've come up with this, you've decided to plant onions or tomatoes, and once they're grown, now you're starting to look for market. And the only market is Kongoya market or Wakulima market. And the other organized markets have a way in which they are structured. Now, you say that we have all these farmer groups coming together on social media where somebody just comes in and says, I have X and I'm looking for a buyer. Let's go into the platform that you'll be launching this afternoon. How would this then operate to the benefit of this one person who's decided to come up with this, use their piece of land in Kitengela, and they've grown some whatever produce they have, and they're looking for market, or somebody who is looking for somebody who's growing something in Uganda or in Tanzania? How would they be able to connect using this platform? There are issues of authenticity. You want to make sure that the person that you're dealing with is actually an authentic trader. And how do you pay? How do you follow up the deliveries?
All right. So first of all, let me start by saying to you, in my company, Elgin, Kenya, we do a lot of work with small farmers. I think we're the biggest in small-scale farm equipment, irrigation of chemicals and fertilizers. And whenever we get a farmer a new person coming into our offices, the first thing we're telling him, we will supply you the technology to grow the best onion in the market, tomatoes, no problem. In Kenya, we have good seeds, we have all the necessary inputs. But please focus on the market first before you start growing. Don't say, I'm going to grow and I'm going to sell it at the end. It never happens. You'll be in trouble. First, identify where the core market is, who's going to buy your produce and at what price, and then work backwards from there. We have so many times, a guy will sit in Nairobi, for instance, and he has, like you said, land in Kitengela, and says, I've got 2 acres, I've got water, let me plant tomatoes. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be quite shrewd in business and clever. So do your market research first. Find out who's going to buy from you. And then, of course, the seasons are important. Sometimes there's too much onions in the market, and sometimes there isn't enough. So you've got to be a little bit clever in terms of identifying when your season will be. And a lot of clever farmers have been counterintuitive. So when there's too many onions, they don't have any onions. So they get a maximum price. But anyway, that's a side point. The second point is we want to make sure that when a manufacturer in Kenya is now posting online saying, my requirement for the next 6 months are XYZ. I need for my potato crisps, for instance, I need this type of potato at this time, or I need, tomato paste, tomatoes for this paste, and this is my requirement over the next few months. We are now trying to get authentication of farmers using SCIA BMOs in that country, so that the guys in Tanzania, our counterpart, country president in Tanzania, will authenticate the guys who are using these platforms are going to be genuine. And way to do it is using a better technology and using financial technology. So we're working with one of these fintech companies to say, authenticate the farmer. It gets ticked off. There's a green box. If you go to Chinese websites, they have a tick box that we've trusted this farmer.
Yep.
We have a KM will say we trust this manufacturer, and that's how they do business together. And M-Pesa works in the whole region. It works really well.
There's that big component that you've mentioned there, market intelligence and advisory services. Are you able to offer them now in a larger scale? Like you're saying, somebody just wants to get into agribusiness. Many people are looking to get into agribusiness, but they have absolutely no clue of how the market is structured or how they can get into the market.
So if I did that, I'll be a multi-billionaire, because it really is.
I like that. Yes, that previous multi.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, honest answer.
Look, when you talk about the market, say for instance in Kenya, and we have these farmers who have this large array of produce, but sometimes people who consume those products want a certain grade, a certain quality of that particular product. Say maybe an outlet wants a certain type of potato, or they want a certain type of maize cob. Now, KEPSA and the amalgam of this association that you are involved in, do they help farmers in understanding where they can go to improve their produce so that they can meet the demands of maybe this niche or this specific markets?
Yeah, so that's the reason we started ASNET, to be honest with you. So you're exactly where we are at the moment. ASNET is the Kenyan equivalent of KEPSA, is the agriculture equivalent of KEPSA in Kenya. At the moment, you won't believe there are 400 different private sector BMOs, research institutions in Kenya. It's so big and it's so dominant in this country. So we created ASNET to be the overall umbrella body to coordinate some of these things you're mentioning. So at the moment, we realize there's so much money going into one sector, it's not going into the other. So we said to each other, how do we get our private sector better coordinated to help the ultimate farmer? It's taken us about a year. We've been around for about 2 years now. It's taking us a long time to bring everybody together. And the only good thing we've seen is government is very responsive to us now. Before, they didn't know who to talk to in the private sector when it came to agriculture. Now, if you talk to any of the PSs in Ministry of Agriculture, you saw PS Desai was with us just now. Government is beginning to realize just how important agriculture is and who the opposing party is now in private sector. And there's a lot more coordination happening between us. Again, I'm telling you, we're not perfect. There's lots of gaps in the system. Some of these new bodies that we've started up under KEPSA, hopefully it's going to bridge the communication between the SMEs. For instance, we have Bwana Muteti, who's one of our board members at KEPSA. We're trying to work with him. We're trying to work with county government. We went to see county government last week, COG. And ASNET is trying to sign an MOU with them, with Honorable Neuro as chairman of the agriculture sector. How do we get ASNET to grassroots level where the agribusiness is happening? And that's why we want to get ASNET down to the grassroots level and organize the private sector there. And that's where the heart is going to be. You won't believe all these years, we've just never had such a systematic way of approaching agribusiness, which is quite tragic, really. But anyway, past is past. Let's move forward. And we want to get down to grassroots level, down to county level, get agriculture organized at that level.
If I could just translate everything we're saying into something actionable that I can relate to directly, I'd be an extremely happy man. But
a multi-billionaire?
A multi-happy man.
Okay.
I am happy, but I would be infinitely happier. There is something that I think, had Dr. Desai been here, maybe he would have been the one to answer it. But since you are the business person, this is something you can also answer. When we look at the small-scale farmer and we look at the small-scale business person in this country, one of the things that I'm really not clear about is what the government does to protect these business people. There are many countries in the world, far more prosperous than us, who have very direct policies of protecting their business people, protecting the agriculture. My favorite example is usually Japan and the production of rice. The production of rice in Japan is actually expensive, but the government protects its rice farmers. Now, when we look at the trading that we're talking about within this country, even as we talk about expanding within the region and beyond East Africa, do you know of policies that the government has been put in place or they're planning to put in place to ensure that the farmer is protected?
Yes, we honestly, we live in a quite a capitalistic market, to be honest. Every man for himself, unfortunately. So recently, if you know the history of government interventions in agriculture, Some have been successful, some maybe not that successful as we wanted them to be. So when they started doing the fertilizer imports of subsidized fertilizer, we know in the end they had to close it down. They've come out with a new program called the e-voucher program. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it's a very good program which Professor Boga has been promoting quite heavily under CS Munya. So what they've done is they've registered farmers and they've registered agro dealers, and they're subsidizing roughly 50% of the inputs that a farmer gets. And I think that's the cleverest way you can go about it. Instead of giving one commodity to a farmer, and sometimes it gets diverted, if you just allow private sector to get involved. So the farmer goes to the agro dealer, he presents his card, the guy will give him, I think, 5,000 shillings worth of goods. Of that, 2,500 comes from the farmer and 2,500 goes from the government. It's working well. It's work in progress. It's just launched a couple of months ago. I think that sort of private sector involvement is really the secret in all this. I give you an example again of the fertilizers. I'm a big fertilizer importer. When the government started importing fertilizer and they started subsidizing it, I stopped importing. I couldn't compete with the government. How does a small company like mine compete with government? It just disrupted everything. When they stopped importing last year, all of us got back in the market, and now we're down to, I think, 4% profit margin. There's so much competition within ourselves. There's enough supply in the country. We fight with each other every day to bring our prices down. This is where the beauty of private sector comes in. Unfortunately, it may not answer your question about protecting the farmer, but if you allow private sector to work, ultimately there'll be a status quo where, the buyer and the seller matches each other, and profit is made at every single level.
Dr. Bimal Kantaria, thank you very much for joining us. All the best as you launch the platform this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Bimal Kantaria is the chairman of the Agriculture Sector Network in the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, also an agripreneur. This has been AgriTalk, where we talk about agribusiness, connecting the dots between agriculture, the business side of it, and how to ensure there's food security in the country. Remember, you can join AgriTalk every weekday between 4 and 5 p.m. Was it 5 and 6 p.m.? 4 and 5 p.m. with Philip Kaitani on KTN Farmers TV.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.